Maya stood by the wide glass window of her office, looking out at the busy city below. The world saw her as one of the most powerful women alive, a CEO whose company touched millions of lives across the globe. Yet when she looked into her own reflection, she still remembered the young girl who once walked barefoot on dusty streets, dreaming of a better life. Maya had not been born into wealth or influence. She grew up in a small neighborhood where people worked hard just to see the next day. Her father drove an old taxi, and her mother sold handmade clothes in the market. Many nights, they could only afford bread and tea for dinner. But what the family lacked in money, they made up for with love. Her parents constantly told her, "Your heart is rich, even if your pockets are not." Those words became the anchor of her soul. From a young age, Maya loved learning. She carried old, second-hand books everywhere, studying under streetlights when electricity failed at home. Neighbors would smile at her determination. "One day, she will do something big," they often said. She did not fully understand what big meant back then, but she believed their words. School was not easy. Maya faced many obstacles: teachers who doubted her, classmates who teased her for her worn-out shoes, and days when she could not pay for textbooks. Yet she never let humiliation break her spirit. Instead, she turned pain into fuel. When others studied for 1 hour, she studied for 3. When life tried to push her down, she stood taller. By the time she entered university, she had already won scholarships through sheer hard work. Even then, life tested her again. She worked part-time jobs cleaning offices, serving food in cafes, and tutoring younger students to cover her living costs. Some nights, she would fall asleep at her desk with tired eyes but an unshaken heart. People often underestimated Maya because she was quiet, humble, and never showed off. But behind her calm presence was a mind sharp as a blade and a heart strong as iron. She dreamed of building something that would not only change her life but also bring pride to her parents and hope to others who grew up like her. After graduation, she entered the business world with nothing but determination. The corporate world was not kind. Boardrooms were filled with people who looked down on her because she was young, because she was a woman, because she came from a place of struggle. Many said, "She won't last here." But Maya did not respond with anger. She responded with results. She studied markets, understood people, and worked longer than anyone else. Slowly, step by step, she built her reputation. Years passed, and the girl who once could not afford a proper pair of shoes now owned one of the most successful companies in the country. Her company started with small ideas supporting local businesses, creating jobs, and making products people could trust. Investors noticed her brilliance, and her company grew from a small office with 3 employees to a global empire worth billions. Yet, despite all her success, Maya never forgot where she came from. She visited her old neighborhood often, funding schools and scholarships for children who were just like her. She built hospitals where families could receive care without worrying about money. Whenever she walked through those streets again, people greeted her with pride in their eyes. "She made it," they whispered, but Maya always smiled and said, "We made it together." In public, Maya appeared graceful, confident, and untouchable. But inside, she carried scars from her journey. She remembered the countless times people disrespected her, the moments she was judged by her appearance, and the times she was told she was not good enough. Those memories lived in her, not as bitterness, but as lessons. They reminded her why she valued respect above everything else. Behind her success, Maya's philosophy was simple: every human being deserved dignity. Whether rich or poor, powerful or powerless, everyone deserved kindness. It was this belief that guided every decision she made in her empire. But destiny has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. Maya believed she had seen all kinds of challenges: financial struggles, business battles, betrayal from partners. What she did not expect was the quiet test that awaited her one ordinary afternoon, far away from the luxury of her office towers. For now, she remained unaware. As she stood in her office, watching the lights of the city sparkle, she felt grateful but also restless. Sometimes, she longed to be among ordinary people again, not as a CEO, but as a woman who could walk into a store, buy something simple, and not be treated differently. That thought lingered in her mind. Perhaps it was the reason she soon decided to make an unannounced visit to one of the largest retail chains in the country, a chain her company had invested billions into. She wanted to see, with her own eyes, how ordinary customers were treated. What began as a quiet personal visit would soon become the storm that shook an entire empire. And it would test Maya's belief in dignity in a way she never imagined. The morning was calm, with golden light spreading across the city. Maya decided to step away from her glass towers, the luxury cars, and the assistants who usually followed her. She wanted something different that day, something simple, something real. She wanted to walk into a store as an ordinary customer, not as the CEO who had her name whispered in boardrooms across the world. She left behind her tailored suits and expensive heels. Instead, she dressed in a plain navy dress, soft shoes, and carried a small handbag. Her hair was tied neatly, and she wore no jewelry except for the small silver bracelet her mother had given her years ago. To anyone looking, she was just another woman walking down the busy street, blending into the crowd. And that was exactly how Maya wanted it. The retail chain she planned to visit was one of the largest in the country. Her company had invested billions into its growth, and she often saw reports filled with numbers, profits, and statistics. But papers never showed the truth of human interaction. Numbers could not reveal if customers were treated with respect, if workers were happy, or if people felt welcome. She wanted to see all that for herself. As she approached the wide entrance of the store, she noticed the bright banners advertising discounts, the automatic glass doors opening and closing for streams of customers, and the neat rows of shopping carts waiting outside. For a moment, she paused. It had been years since she had entered a place like this without announcing who she was. The thought gave her a quiet sense of excitement. Inside, the store buzzed with life. Families moved through the aisles with shopping lists in hand, children pointed at toys, and elderly couples compared prices. The smell of fresh bread from the bakery corner floated in the air, mixing with the faint sound of soft background music. Maya walked slowly, taking everything in. She started by browsing the clothing section. Her fingers brushed against simple cotton shirts, jeans stacked neatly, and dresses lined on hangers. She thought of her mother, who used to sew clothes late into the night to earn a little extra money. Back then, Maya often dreamed of being able to buy clothes without worrying about the price tag. Standing here now, she smiled softly. Life had changed so much. But her purpose was not just nostalgia. She wanted to watch how the staff interacted with customers. Did they greet them with kindness? Did they show patience? She noticed a young worker helping an elderly man reach for a box of cereal on the top shelf. The worker smiled warmly and even carried the box to the man's cart. The small act touched Maya's heart. This, she thought, was the kind of dignity every customer deserved. As she moved toward the electronics section, her eyes caught a young mother holding her crying baby while trying to compare two phones. She struggled with one hand while bouncing the child with the other. A staff member passed by without offering help, too busy adjusting items on a shelf. Maya frowned slightly but kept her thoughts to herself. She wanted to see more before drawing conclusions. Finally, she walked toward the service counter, where the store manager stood. Maya approached with the intention of asking a simple question about a product. She wanted to test not just the friendliness of the staff but the attitude of leadership. For Maya, leadership was the heart of every organization. If the leader respected people, the workers would follow. The manager, a woman in her mid-40s, stood behind the counter with a stern look. She seemed busy giving instructions to two employees, her voice sharp and impatient. Customers waited in line, shifting uncomfortably as the manager dismissed small concerns with quick, cold replies. Maya waited patiently. When it was her turn, she stepped forward with her calm smile. "Excuse me," she said softly, "could you help me with some information about one of your items?" The manager looked up, her eyes scanning Maya from head to toe. She saw only a plainly dressed woman with no signs of wealth or importance. Her expression changed into one of irritation, as if Maya's presence was an interruption. Without even hearing the full question, the manager said, "If you can't find it, then you're not looking properly. Ask one of the junior staff, I don't have time for this." The words were sharp, cutting through the air. People standing nearby turned their heads. Maya felt the sting of disrespect, not because of what was said, but because of the dismissive tone, cold, impatient, lacking even the simplest courtesy. Still, Maya remained calm. She lowered her voice, trying again, "I just need a little guidance. It will only take a moment." The manager sighed heavily, clearly annoyed. "I told you, go ask someone else. Don't waste my time." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Maya stood there, her heart steady but her mind observing everything. The same woman who commanded respect in boardrooms across the globe was now being treated as if she were invisible, as if her presence had no worth. But Maya did not raise her voice. She did not reveal her identity. Instead, she simply nodded, thanked the manager quietly, and stepped aside. As she walked away, she could feel the weight of curious eyes following her. She blended back into the aisles, but her thoughts were no longer calm. What she had just witnessed was more than rudeness, it was a mirror reflecting how many ordinary customers might be treated daily. Maya continued her quiet walk through the store, but her heart grew heavier with every step. She came seeking truth, and the truth was beginning to show itself in ways she had not expected. She did not know yet, but this simple visit was only the beginning of a storm that would shake not just the store, but the entire chain to its core. The store was still full of people, each lost in their own small world of shopping. But for Maya, time felt slower, heavier. Her steps echoed in her own heart as she tried to shake off the sting of the manager's words. She had not come for special treatment. She had come only to see how people were treated when no one knew who she was. And what she had found, even in those few short moments, was a kind of coldness that left her unsettled. Maya walked quietly through the aisles once more, her eyes soft but thoughtful. She noticed small things that many would miss. She saw an elderly woman asking for help lifting a heavy bag of flour, and a worker passing by without stopping. She saw a young man at the checkout counter being rushed, his questions cut short by the cashier's impatience. Not every worker behaved this way. Some were kind, some were patient, but the lack of warmth seemed to flow from the top, from the one who was supposed to lead by example. The memory of the manager's dismissive tone followed her. It was not just what had been said, but how it had been said, like she was a burden, like she was not worth a single moment of attention. For someone like Maya, who built her life on respect and kindness, this small encounter felt like a crack in something much larger. She thought of her mother. Her mother had always taught her that words could heal or harm. "Speak with kindness, even when the world is harsh," her mother used to say. But here, in this store, the voice of leadership carried no kindness. Maya decided she would try once more, not for herself, but for the truth. She turned back toward the service counter, where the manager still stood, arms folded, speaking sternly to another worker. When Maya reached the counter again, she waited politely. The manager noticed her and frowned, clearly irritated that she had returned. "You again," the manager said, her tone sharp. "Didn't I tell you to ask someone else?" Maya's voice remained steady, gentle. "I understand. But I believe leaders set the example. Sometimes a simple answer from you can show others how to treat customers." Her words were calm, not challenging, but they carried weight. For a moment, silence filled the air around them. Several customers standing nearby had stopped to watch. The workers behind the counter exchanged glances, unsure of how their manager would respond. The manager's face tightened. Perhaps she felt embarrassed being spoken to in front of others. Perhaps she simply could not see past Maya's plain dress and modest appearance. Whatever the reason, her patience broke. She stepped forward, her voice rising. "Who do you think you are to tell me how to run my store? You're just another shopper wasting my time." The words rang out, echoing louder than the music playing overhead. People turned fully now, their carts paused in the middle of the aisles. Maya felt the weight of all those eyes, but she stood still, calm, her gaze steady. "I am just a customer," Maya answered softly. "But every customer deserves to be treated with respect." Her reply was quiet, but its strength lay in its simplicity. For a brief second, the manager looked startled, as if the plain truth was too sharp to ignore. But pride is heavy, and instead of softening, the manager's pride hardened. With a sudden, rash motion, the manager lifted her hand and struck Maya across the face. The sound was small, but in the quiet that followed, it seemed to echo like thunder. Gasps filled the air. A child clung to his mother's arm, whispering, "Why did she do that?" An elderly man shook his head in disbelief. Workers froze where they stood, their faces pale with shock. Maya's head turned slightly from the force, but she did not stumble. She stood upright, her hand slowly rising to touch the side of her face. Her skin burned, but her heart remained calm. She looked into the manager's eyes not with anger, not with hatred, but with quiet strength. The silence in the store was heavy. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The crowd waited, expecting Maya to shout, to fight back, to demand justice on the spot. But Maya did none of those things. Instead, she simply straightened her posture and looked around at the people watching. Her voice, when it came, was soft but clear. "You saw this," she said gently. "And perhaps one day, you will remember how silence can be as loud as action." Then she turned and walked away. Her steps were steady, graceful, even though inside her chest her heart was heavy. She did not look back. She did not give the manager another word. She simply walked through the aisles, past the shocked faces, past the checkout counters, and out the wide glass doors into the open air. Outside, the sun was still shining, the world still moving, as if nothing had happened. Maya paused for a moment, closing her eyes, letting the breeze touch her skin. She felt no anger, only a deep sadness. Not for herself, but for the truth she had just witnessed. For if this was how a manager treated one customer, how many others had walked out of the store carrying the same weight of disrespect? Maya took a deep breath. She knew now that her visit had revealed more than numbers ever could. And though the crowd inside had remained silent, her own silence would not last forever. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. Inside the store, the sound of the doors closing behind Maya seemed to release the crowd from its frozen state. People looked at one another, whispering softly, their eyes wide with shock. Some felt uneasy, some felt guilty, and some quickly turned back to their shopping carts as if nothing had happened. Silence had been their choice, and now that silence sat heavy in their hearts. A young man near the counter whispered to his friend, "That wasn't right. She didn't deserve that." His friend nodded, but neither of them had spoken when it happened. An elderly woman shook her head, sighing, "In all my years, I have never seen such treatment." Yet she too had stayed still, clutching her purse, afraid of making a scene. The workers behind the counter looked down, ashamed. They had long known their manager's harsh temper, but none of them had dared to speak up. Fear had tied their tongues, fear of losing their jobs, fear of becoming the next target. And so they remained quiet, even as their hearts told them that silence was wrong. The manager, still standing stiffly behind the counter, tried to act as if nothing had happened. But her eyes betrayed unease. She glanced at the crowd, expecting someone to challenge her, but no one did. For a brief moment, she felt triumphant in her authority, but deep inside, she knew something had shifted in the air. Respect could never be demanded through fear, it had to be earned. Outside, Maya walked slowly down the busy street. People brushed past her, unaware of what had just taken place. She touched the side of her face, still warm, but it was not the sting of the moment that troubled her most, it was the silence. Dozens of people had witnessed the act, yet not a single voice had risen in her defense. Her mind wandered back to her childhood. She remembered moments when she had faced insults in school. Sometimes classmates had mocked her clothes, sometimes teachers had doubted her abilities. Back then too, most people had stayed silent. Yet, every time, she had promised herself that if she ever found strength, she would use it not just for herself but for others who had no voice. As she walked, she wondered about the people in the store. Did they remain silent because they agreed with the manager? Or did they stay silent because fear chained them? Either way, silence had become its own answer, and it echoed louder than the act itself. Maya stopped at a small cafe near the corner and sat by the window. She ordered a cup of tea and stirred it slowly, her reflection staring back at her from the glass. She thought of her employees back at her company, the way she reminded them daily that respect was not optional, but a foundation. Every person who walks through our doors, she often told them, must leave with dignity, no matter who they are. Yet here, in a store that carried billions of her investment, the very opposite had happened. The memory of the manager's voice replayed in her mind, sharp, dismissive, and filled with pride. And then the silence of the crowd, eyes watching but mouths closed. Maya's heart ached, not for herself, but for the truth she had uncovered. If she, a woman of influence, could be treated this way when she appeared ordinary, what about those who truly had no power? How many customers had walked out of those doors carrying invisible wounds of humiliation? How many workers had suffered in silence under poor leadership? Her tea grew cold as she sat in thought. The city outside moved on, unaware of the storm brewing quietly in her heart. Maya was not angry, anger was never her way. She was thoughtful, reflective, and deeply saddened. But in that sadness, a seed of resolve began to grow. Back inside the store, the atmosphere remained heavy. The crowd went back to their shopping, but the incident lingered in their minds. Some replayed the moment, wondering why they had not spoken. Others pushed it aside, convincing themselves it was not their place. But deep down, every person there knew they had witnessed something they could not easily forget. The workers, especially, felt the weight of guilt. One of them, a young woman named Lila, whispered to a colleague, "She was right. Every customer deserves respect." The colleague nodded, but both of them lowered their voices, afraid their manager might overhear. Their silence had protected their jobs, but it had wounded their hearts. That night, when those customers and workers returned to their homes, many of them told their families about what they had seen. Some spoke with shame, some with sorrow, some with disbelief. And though they tried to move on, the image of a calm woman standing with dignity in the face of disrespect remained etched in their minds. Maya, meanwhile, returned to her office hours later. The city lights glittered below her, but her eyes were heavy. She stood once again by the wide glass window, the same place she had stood that morning, but now the view felt different. She had gone seeking truth, and she had found it not in numbers, not in charts, but in the silence of a crowd. She pressed her hands together, whispering softly to herself, "Respect is not measured in reports. It is measured in moments." And in that moment, Maya knew her silence could not last. She would not raise her voice in anger, but she would take action in her own way. Her dignity was intact, but her resolve had grown stronger. The silence of the crowd had revealed a truth too deep to ignore. And soon, that truth would rise louder than silence ever could. The next morning, the city woke up to an ordinary day. People hurried to offices, children rushed to schools, and traffic filled the streets as usual. Yet behind closed doors in tall buildings, whispers began to spread, whispers that would soon become headlines. Maya arrived at her company headquarters quietly, as she always did. Her staff greeted her warmly, but they noticed something different in her eyes. She carried herself with the same calm dignity, yet there was a heaviness in her gaze, as though her heart held a story too great to ignore. She called for a private meeting with her closest advisors. They gathered in the boardroom, waiting for her words. The large room was silent except for the hum of the city outside. Maya placed her hands gently on the table, her silver bracelet catching the morning light. "I went to one of the retail chain stores yesterday," she said softly. "Not as a CEO, not as an investor, but as an ordinary customer." Her advisors exchanged surprised glances. Maya often believed in seeing things with her own eyes, but none of them expected her to visit a store quietly, without security or staff. "What I saw," she continued, "was not written in any of our reports. I saw customers ignored. I saw workers fearful. And I saw a leader, a manager who treated people without dignity." The boardroom fell silent. Everyone leaned closer, sensing the weight of her words. She paused, remembering the sting on her face, not from pain, but from the meaning behind it. "I was spoken to without kindness. I was treated as if my presence had no worth. And in front of a crowd of people, the manager crossed a line that no leader should ever cross." The advisors stiffened, shock spreading across their faces. They had worked with Maya long enough to know her values. They knew how deeply she believed in respect and humanity. To hear that she, of all people, had been treated so poorly by the very chain her company had invested billions into, it was almost unthinkable. One of the advisors finally spoke. "Did they know who you were?" Maya shook her head. "No. And that is the point. Respect should not depend on who someone is. Respect is owed to everyone, every customer, every worker, every human being. What happened to me has likely happened to countless others, only without witnesses, without voices to tell their story." Her words struck the boardroom like thunder. Maya was not angry, but the calm strength in her voice carried more power than anger ever could. News of Maya's experience spread quietly at first, like a ripple in water. Some of her staff shared whispers with others. A worker from the store, unable to carry the weight of what had happened, told a friend. And soon, the ripple grew into waves. By evening, media outlets picked up the story. "Unidentified customer disrespected in major retail store," one headline read. At first, no one outside knew it was Maya. But rumors began to grow, and within hours, the truth surfaced. The woman in the plain navy dress was not just any customer, she was Maya, the CEO whose company had invested $5 billion into the chain. The revelation shook the business world. Reporters rushed to confirm the details, customers filled social media with outrage, and ordinary people shared their own stories of being mistreated in stores. Suddenly, the silence that had filled the aisles yesterday was replaced with voices loud, strong, and unshaken. Inside the retail chain's headquarters, panic spread. Executives scrambled to understand what had happened. Calls were made, urgent meetings were held, and messages were sent to control the damage. The manager who had humiliated Maya was silent now, realizing too late who she had struck with her words and actions. But for Maya, the focus was never revenge. She did not care about public embarrassment or personal pride. What mattered to her was the principle. "This is not about me," she told her advisors during a second meeting. "This is about every person who has ever been treated as if their dignity did not matter. It is about the silent crowd who watched, the workers who feared speaking, and the countless others who walked away carrying invisible wounds. Her voice grew firmer as she spoke. Money cannot protect a company if its heart is weak. And no empire can stand tall if it is built on the silence of injustice. Her advisors listened, moved by her words. They had seen her strength in business, but today they saw something greater: the strength of her humanity. The revelation reached the people in her old neighborhood too. Children who once saw her as a role model now saw her as living proof that dignity mattered more than power. Parents spoke her name with pride, reminding their children, "She has not forgotten where she came from." Across the nation, conversations began. People discussed respect at workplaces, in schools, in homes. Ordinary customers recalled their own experiences of being ignored or belittled in stores. For many, Maya's story was not just her story, it was theirs too. That night, as Maya sat by her window once more, she saw the city lights differently. She thought of the crowd's silence, the manager's harshness, and the ripple her quiet dignity had created. She whispered softly, "Sometimes it takes one moment to reveal a truth hidden for years." And she knew the next step was hers to take. For the revelation had only begun. The decision was yet to come, and with it, the destiny of an entire chain would soon change forever. The news spread like fire across the country. Everywhere people gathered, at homes, offices, schools, and marketplaces, Maya's story was on their lips. Television anchors spoke her name, newspapers printed bold headlines, and social media overflowed with voices. The story of one quiet visit had become a national conversation. Inside Maya's headquarters, phones rang endlessly. Investors called with worry, journalists requested statements, and partners sought reassurance. But behind her calm office doors, Maya was not focused on noise. She was focused on truth. She sat at the long boardroom table once again, her advisors around her. Charts and reports lay on the table, but Maya's eyes rested not on numbers, but on the faces of the people who had worked beside her for years. "This is not about business anymore," she said, her voice steady. "This is about values. Our $5 billion investment has supported a chain that does not honor the dignity of its customers or its workers. And yesterday, I saw it with my own eyes." One of her advisors leaned forward carefully. "Maya, if we pull out, the chain may collapse. Thousands of jobs will be at risk. The market will shake. The decision will have great consequences." Maya nodded. "I understand. And I do not take this lightly. But I ask you this: what is the cost of silence? If we stay, we send a message that money is more important than humanity. And if we leave, yes, there will be loss, but it will remind the world that respect is not negotiable." Her words filled the room with quiet strength. The advisors exchanged thoughtful looks. They had always admired her ability to see beyond numbers, to see people instead of profits. After a long silence, one of the senior advisors spoke. "Whatever decision you make, we will stand with you." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. She thought of her parents, who had worked hard with little means. She thought of her childhood neighbors who had always treated one another with kindness, no matter how poor they were. She thought of the crowd in the store, standing silent as disrespect unfolded before them. And she thought of every person who might walk into a store tomorrow, carrying only hope for fair treatment. She opened her eyes. "We will pull our investment." The room was silent for a heartbeat. Everyone understood what her words meant. The $5 billion partnership that had built the chain into a giant would end. News of her decision broke within hours. The business world trembled. Stock prices of the chain began to fall, executives scrambled to control the damage, and workers whispered anxiously about their future. The manager at the center of it all sat in silence, realizing the storm her actions had brought. But outside boardrooms and offices, ordinary people celebrated Maya's choice. Customers filled social media with messages of gratitude. Finally, one woman wrote, Someone powerful has reminded the world that respect comes before money. A teacher told her students, "This is history you are watching. Values speak louder than numbers." Maya did not celebrate, however. She knew the weight of her decision. She knew jobs were tied to the chain, families depended on it, and fear would rise in the hearts of many workers. That night, she sat alone in her office, staring at the skyline. The city glowed with countless lights, but her own thoughts were heavy. She whispered softly, "Did I do the right thing?" And then she remembered the silence in the store, the burning on her face, and the heavy eyes of customers who had walked away. She remembered the words she had spoken quietly, "Every customer deserves respect." Her heart answered her question. Yes, it was the right thing. For without respect, no job, no chain, no empire could truly stand. Over the next few days, the effects of her decision spread. Some called her bold, some called her reckless. But most called her brave. Families discussed her name around dinner tables. Workers in other companies whispered to each other, "If she can take a stand, maybe one day our voices will be heard too." And though the chain struggled, though its leaders tried to hold it together, the truth could not be erased. Customers began leaving, investors pulled back, and the empire that once stood proud began to tremble. In the middle of it all, Maya remained calm. She did not gloat, she did not point fingers. She simply reminded the world with her quiet strength, dignity cannot be bought. And no company will ever rise higher than the respect it gives its people. Her decision had been made. The world had heard it. And now, all that remained was the final step, sharing her message with everyone, not just as a CEO, but as a human being who believed in kindness above all. The stage was set. The collapse of the chain was near. But more than collapse, it was the beginning of a lesson the world would never forget. The morning sun rose gently over the city, but the world seemed different now. News outlets buzzed with headlines: CEO pulls $5 billion investment after public humiliation, respect over profit, Maya's bold decision. Across homes, offices, and schools, people read, shared, and talked about her story. Maya sat in her office, not surrounded by flashing cameras or reporters, but by quiet walls and a window that looked out at the city she loved. She did not seek attention. She never had. Her heart had always been guided by a simple principle: respect is not optional, it is essential. And now, after everything that had happened, she knew it was time to speak, not as a CEO, but as a human being, reminding the world of what truly mattered. She began drafting a statement. She wrote with care, each word carrying weight, each sentence meant to inspire, not scold. "Power is not measured in money, influence, or titles," she wrote. "Power is measured by the way we treat each other. Every human being deserves dignity, kindness, and respect. Not because they are rich or famous, but because they are human." Her team reviewed the statement. They knew it would reach millions. Some were nervous. "Maya, some may misinterpret it," they cautioned. But she smiled softly. "I am not speaking for approval," she said. "I am speaking for truth." By afternoon, her message went public. The world read it, shared it, and responded. Social media filled with support. Ordinary customers shared stories of times they had been ignored or humiliated, finding in Maya's words the courage to speak. Workers from other companies expressed hope, inspired to demand fair treatment in their own workplaces. Even executives from rival chains admitted they had learned a lesson in leadership. Maya knew that the chain she had pulled out of would not survive without the investment, but that was not the point. The lesson was greater than business. The lesson was about values, about humanity. She wanted everyone to understand that no empire, no store, no corporation could thrive on disrespect. Meanwhile, inside the failing chain, the manager who had humiliated Maya was left to reflect. The walls of her office felt smaller, the silence louder. For the first time, she realized that authority alone was not power. True power was in how one treated people. Her pride had blinded her, and the cost was enormous. Across the nation, ordinary people watched the unfolding events with awe. Families discussed the story over meals. Teachers used Maya's actions as lessons about integrity. Children, inspired by her courage, began talking about kindness, fairness, and standing up for others. The ripple of one act, small yet profound, had reached far beyond the glass doors of a single store. Back in her office, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a girl walking barefoot on dusty streets to a woman whose quiet dignity had changed the course of millions of lives, she understood the true meaning of influence. It was not wealth, it was not fame, it was the courage to do what was right, even when no one was watching, even when the world seemed silent. She remembered the crowd in the store, standing frozen as the manager struck her. Their silence had weighed heavily at the time, but now she saw it differently. Silence, when broken by action, could transform into something stronger. The lesson had not been lost. The world had listened. In her final public address, Maya spoke not with anger, not with pride, but with gentle authority. She said, "Yesterday, we witnessed disrespect. Today, we must witness respect. Treat each other with kindness. Honor every human being. And remember that true strength is measured not by the power we hold, but by the care we show." Her words spread like sunlight through clouds, touching hearts that had long been weighed down by fear, injustice, or silence. People found hope, inspiration, and courage in her calm, unwavering voice. Maya knew the chain was finished. She knew some would call her decision harsh or too sudden. But she also knew this was bigger than money or business. It was about setting an example, a reminder that dignity and kindness must never be sacrificed for profit. Weeks later, as she visited schools, community centers, and local businesses in her old neighborhood, she saw the impact firsthand. Children smiled as they spoke of fairness. Workers discussed how they had started standing up for themselves. Parents told their families about the woman who had reminded the world of respect. And Maya, standing quietly among them, felt a deep peace in her heart. The chain might have fallen, but its collapse was not failure. It was proof that integrity matters. That courage matters. That humanity matters. Maya's quiet act of resilience had echoed across cities, nations, and hearts. As night fell, she returned to her office, looking out at the city lights. She touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, a gift from her mother years ago, and whispered softly, "It was never about revenge. It was always about truth. And truth will always shine, even when the world seems silent." The story of one ordinary woman, standing with dignity in the face of disrespect, had now become an inspiration for millions. And as Maya closed her eyes that night, she knew the lesson would last far longer than any headline, any investment, or any chain. Respect, kindness, and humanity, the true empire of the world, had won.